In this video, I'm going to be answering your questions that you asked me on my most recent YouTube post. There was a few crackers in there, one of which really caught my eye about Charles Leclerc and the overlapping brake and throttle technique, which I've dug into, done a little bit of research. I'm going to present you my findings. I'm going to walk you through my process and methodology to be able to problem solve and work out what's happening here. And I'm going to answer all of the questions on that post. So if you're interested in my answers, definitely keep watching. Welcome back to the channel, guys. My name is Martin. I'm a specialist technical coach and mentor for open formula drivers. In this video, I'm going to be answering your questions, like I say, one of which really caught my eye and I had to do a bit of research for. So we'll probably start with that one if it's okay and bring it up on the screen now in front of you. So it's from Divinason, if I pronounce that correctly. And it says, what do you make of Charles Leclerc's throttle/brake overlap technique on the corner entry? And then I replied, hey, can you provide an example to help me verify it? This is the first I've heard of this. Generally wouldn't be recommended, like combining the throttle and brake together with the steering to try to balance the car is like a can of worms. Honestly, it's not something you want to be doing. It's not something that's either necessary, like provided you're on the right line, you're hitting your braking points, you're downshifting correctly, you've got the car set up, your differential, this, that, like your trail braking, your wet lines, whatever. It's not something that you need to be doing. So it adds an extra level of complexity, which I wouldn't be recommending. That being said, do I even believe that there are advantages in this? No, neither. It's never been one of my philosophies to combine the brake and throttle at the same time. Things get really messy because if something's wrong, what is it? Is it the brake or the throttle or the percentage of one or the other or the braking setup, including brake migration, brake balance, engine braking, this, that? Or is it the throttle setup, including throttle mapping, throttle shape, power, torque, all those on throttle differential, all of that? Like it just becomes a disaster. So you definitely don't want to be doing it. Now, it was interesting that this comment, what do you make of Charles Leclerc's throttle brake overlap on corner entry? And I said, hey, can you provide me an example? Because I had to brush up on this. So Divinason got back to me and said, sure, the channel is track down and the video is why is Charles Leclerc so fast? So I went and had a look at that video. I didn't watch it all. It was 25 minutes or something. I only wanted to see this Charles Leclerc part. And he basically goes onto the onboard TV graphics and shows the green throttle on and active while the brake is also on and active, and pretty much suggests therefore that it's got to do with rotation, or I'm not going to quote, it's just based on my memory here, that's got to do with his driving style and his rotation, his balancing the car, and it's all purposeful and this and that. And I'm like, well, hang on a minute. My initial reaction is like I said at the very start, this is not one of my philosophies. This is not something that we would do or teach or coach. None of the other drivers do this. It's not necessary. So I'm like, hang on a minute. Let's trust but verify. One of my massive philosophies and principles as well is like, don't take everything on face value. Do your own research, do your own homework, and like see where we end up here. So let's have a look. So the guy presents the TV graphic with the throttle showing on and the brakes on as well. Okay, fine. So what we need to do first is check on the telemetry. Do we see this happening? So let's jump over to the telemetry now and have a look at it together. Alrighty, hopefully you can see that on the screen in front of you. So I started to look around different tracks and years and so on. And I landed on Azerbaijan Baku because Leclerc got pole here. So we can have a look at the onboard lap later. It gives us an extra level of information that we wouldn't normally have. So 24 Azerbaijan, this is Leclerc, it's just his lap. And here we go, check this out. None of the throttle traces, and I'm going to zoom in just for your convenience so you can see that, like where my cursor is, none of the throttle traces actually make it back to zero. Have a look at this last one over here. It's hovering at 12%. And this is while Leclerc is braking, guys. So when I saw this, I'm not going to lie, I was a bit shocked. I was like, Jesus, like, is this really what Leclerc is doing? Not fully getting out of the throttle whilst he's braking. If we just zoom in on, this is turn 2 in Azerbaijan. Yeah, you can see it just hovering around the 9-10%. So you still got to do a little bit more work. So yes, this aligns with that guy's video, and the throttle is showing on in the TV onboard, and it is showing on in the telemetry as well. So we still need to do a little bit more work. We see throttle on the TV graphic. We see throttle in the telemetry, but do we hear throttle in the onboard? Let me just grab my headphones. We're going to listen to an onboard together now, and then listen, do we hear throttle on this lap, this exact pole lap? And that's why I said we chose this lap, to see what's going on. Do we actually hear some throttle? So let's go back to the start of this pole lap, and I'll bring it up and we're going to watch the first few corners together. I don't hear any on throttle there. Neither. So look, I'll just pause it there, guys, because I don't actually hear any throttle in the background like that you would expect to hear if this thing's at 12%, right? So that's my first kind of check against this theory. So like, yeah, we saw it on the TV, we saw it on the telemetry. I see throttle, but I don't hear throttle. You would expect to hear like a really constant when Leclerc's braking and there's that fade. Actually, what I hear is off throttle coasting, which is what all the other drivers would be doing at that point. You're completely off the brakes and you've got full steering capacity. You're asking for the car to turn at that point. And that's what I hear. I don't hear a background throttle. So like I said, my first instinct and intuition was that this can't be something that Charles is doing. And then we need to kind of answer for this and say, well, what's going on? Anyway, so one more check I want to do is I want to compare this to another driver, and then I want to check the revs, and we have access to both of those. So let's do that together now. All right, here we go. So same place, Azerbaijan, Leclerc got pole, and Carlos Sainz is our friend that we're going to be checking against here. So check this out. Like I'm going to zoom in before. So Sainz in white is completely off throttle when we would expect, when you can see Charles Leclerc still has some throttle on. If I just zoom in here, you'll see it pretty much there. So it's a 6 and 0, 7 and 0, 5. Again, this is fascinating, guys. Like when I saw this, I couldn't believe it. So one thing we need to check, or we can use to check, is going to be the revs, right? Now check this out. Let's take turn 1 as an example where my cursor is. And I'm not going to zoom in actually, because when I do zoom in, you kind of lose a bit of the detail on the throttle. Well, actually, this one's not too bad. So I am actually going to use this one. So if we zoom in on turn 1, guys, what's going on here? We need to check the revs and see what's happening. So what we see is the gear, Leclerc in red, don't forget, and Carlos in white. We see Leclerc downshifting like more aggressively, earlier, harder, faster, quicker, whatever. Leclerc's the one going boom, 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 like trying to pull the gears back. Carlos is just doing the braking and then ticking the gears down in very quick succession thereafter, from 8 down to 4 in this case. Now, straight away, I can tell you guys straight away which is quicker in Baku. Anytime you don't have braking capacity, that is braking capacity, you want to supplement that with engine braking. You want to make up for that. How can you do it? Wind the engine braking up, click the downshifts quicker. It's a much faster way of driving a qualifying lap. Now, it's not as efficient in the race. You're going to chew through a lot of fuel, but I can tell you straight away, if I had to just be picking one of these laps at Baku, when you don't have braking capacity, I'd go with Leclerc because he's using the gears a lot more and he's getting a lot more braking potential out of the car. You can see how much later he brakes because he's got the engine braking to go with it. So Leclerc braking here in red, Carlos is braking earlier and longer. And if I was coaching Carlos, I'd be like, bang, there's your insight. Use more engine braking, mate. So that's the sort of thing that you can get when you understand what's going on. Now, my check here is we see throttle, we see 7, 4, 3, 4, 6, 5. We see throttle here for Mr. Leclerc. Do we see it on the revs? Now, look, this spike that you see here, or not spike, but this rev period where Leclerc is above Carlos, that's due to the downshifts. If we draw a line straight down here, that's Leclerc starting to do. Of course you expect more revs there. But when he's totally done with the downshifts and we're down here, do we see significantly more revs for Charles? I'd argue no. I'd argue that the revs are just what they are. Actually, the way they come on here is pretty similar. So what we're looking for is that if there's 10% more throttle, where's the 10% more revs as well? That's what I'm looking for. Let's take a look at another example here. And as you can see, the downshifts that are happening earlier, you'll see the red, just this line here, start to do. That's happening very often here, here, and at turn 1, like we said. And the revs, therefore, here, they are, therefore they're higher on that initial phase, but the minimum rev is what I'm looking for. So let's take a look at another corner example just to have a look again, compare the revs. So let's take a look at this one here. I'm just going to click my cursor here and see what's going on. So Leclerc's got 5% throttle on and Carlos has 0. And this corner is turn 3, the one we actually saw. So it's a good example. And again, let's take a look at the whole rev situation and downshifting situation. So we had a look at turn 1 already. And now we're going to have a look at turn 3. So this is the part that kind of strikes me as a bit strange. You've got like Leclerc doing all the downshifts quickly here. Bang, bang, bang. So the red coming down and then Carlos doing the usual thing. And that coincides with Leclerc's revs being higher there as well. But again, they rejoin at some point later on after Leclerc has done all the downshifting. Actually, there's a point here at which Leclerc has less revs as he's done his downshifts and he's just off throttle, right? And we see 6% to Leclerc on throttle and 0 to Carlos. How is it possible that Leclerc has 7.7 on the clock? That is 7,721 RPM. And Carlos, and they're in the same gear 3, and Carlos has 7,987 on the clock after he's done his downshifts. If Leclerc has 6% throttle on, that's the part, guys, that's throwing me off here. Like we see throttle, but we don't hear it, and it's not reflected on the revs. Just for context and clarity, what I'm looking for here is if there's a consistent, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8% going on here of Leclerc with carrying this throttle, I'm looking for that to be reflected in the minimum revs. Because a car that never fully comes off throttle, gear for gear, speed for speed, corner for corner, car for car, should have a higher rev. That kind of not debunks it, but like it kind of supports my argument that I don't think this is actual legitimate on throttle. So then you ask the question, well, what's going on here? Why does Leclerc have his foot on the throttle if it's not doing anything? Well, quirky driver habits could be one explanation. And by the way, guys, I might just give you guys a confidence interval of how I'm feeling about this. My assertion is that it's not doing anything. There's a throttle dead zone set up. Leclerc's just resting his foot on the throttle when he comes, when he comes out of the brake pedal, he's resting his foot on the throttle, and Ferrari have set up a dead zone to say anything up to 10% throttle is not going to do anything. And we're going to start your throttle from 10% onwards. That's my hypothesis. So why would he be doing this? Well, I just think it's like, again, quirky driver habit. He might just like the feeling of his foot resting on the throttle because that gives him that, like I'm preloading, like the muscle and the foot and everything is already engaged. All he has to do then is proceed forward. He might be more comfortable pressing the throttle from the on throttle position and proceeding forward rather than having his foot completely off and then trying to find contact with the pedal, which is the usual case, right? And I hope that makes sense. If I can just use my drink bottle as an analogy here. Leclerc wants to rest his foot on that so that all he has to do is press and, like he's already got everything, the foot in contact and the calf muscles engaged and everything ready to go, as opposed to normally you're off throttle. And then when you want to go for the initial throttle application, you have to go like that, right? And push it from there. So there might be a thing where he's just more comfortable doing it that way. Is there lap time? No, I don't think so. Is this like a technique? I don't think so either. I think it falls in the category of habit. And I mean, we should hear it and we should see it reflected in the revs. Again, what I was looking for there was Leclerc's revs constantly higher on the minimum side than someone like Carlos, for example. So that's why I think he's doing it. I think it's a comfort thing, just to reiterate. and he's just more comfortable. There's not much more to add than that, honestly. So thank you for your question. I hope my answer makes sense. Again, if you had a follow-up question, leave it in the comments section for me below. But otherwise, I'll move on to the next question. Okay, so we're going to go top down. Who have we got next? So Sam Moore 3687, thanks for your question. How do we find the driving style that suits us in sim racing? I've been sim racing for a while now and looking to take the next step to actual racing, but I find it hard to properly know what driving style I prefer. If I had to answer, I would say I prefer oversteer, as I like to rotate my car faster for exits and sacrifice my entry speed. However, that's only in a sim, and I'm not sure the feeling I have for oversteer and understeer will correlate into real life. So I guess what I'm asking is, how do we find our unique driving styles in actual cars or single-seaters without trying to replicate everything we do in the sim, as there are some very big differences as well as similarities? Oof, that's a good question. It's the first time I'm reading that, so I do need to digest it a little bit. Like the Leclerc one was the only one I really gave proper thought leading into the video. So I think what you're asking is, how do we find our unique style? Like as a tennis player, for example, if you were a tennis player, and I'm not a tennis player, but I just give analogies because it makes sense. Yeah, you get familiar with your style pretty quickly. Rafa's got the big, heavy topspin. Roger's got the one-handed backhand. Novak's just brick wall from the baseline. The styles are very easy to see and very easy to highlight strengths and weaknesses. In our sport, that's much harder to see, like what we're doing with Leclerc before and Fernando's aggressive steering input and that sort of thing. The best way to work out your style is to compare. Get a friend who's a similar level, get someone who's at a higher level, work out where your lap time is being lost or won, and then you'll be able to say, that's my style. I'm slower here because I prefer this. I'm faster here compared to him because I do this and I prefer things this way. Does that make sense? It's very hard to look at your own and say, well, that's your style. Style is a comparative term, in my opinion. Like Fernando turning the steering wheel a lot in the Renault days was as compared to everyone else on the grid. Leclerc doing this with the throttle is completely normal for him, but as compared to everyone else on the grid, this is totally weird and no one else does this. So I think, how do you find your own driving style? Number one, start with comparison. Compare with your friends, compare with someone of a similar level to you and see where you're quicker or slower, and then try to highlight, my style is the short corner and that's why I'm getting better entries or better exits, or my style is to prefer oversteer and that helps me with rotation in the long corner but hurts me in the increasing radius corner. So try to frame things that way, compare your styles to someone else's. And then I guess the second part of your question is looking to take the next step to actual racing, but I find it hard to probably know what driving style I prefer. Again, play with the extremities. Set the car up with a good amount of oversteer and then set the car up with a good amount of understeer. Try to drive them both. Pick one, like discard one completely and just pick one and then refine that. But this is an interesting question because I've never been a massive fan of like you should be driving to a style. I think like chuck the word style out of the window for a minute. Just focus on like the lap time. That should be your style. Whatever's quick, right? If it's quicker, it's going to be your style. So try to adapt, use the delta, use the speed trap, use the splits, use the sector times, use the minimum speeds, use all these things in your telemetry as well as your own feel, and just try to go quicker and then go in that direction. Whether that's the style A, B, or C, I'm not sure. It could be very different for different cars. Like we've spoken about Lewis's style not quite suiting these cars because he likes to brake very late and very aggressive, and these cars are big and heavy, right? So it's not a style you want to be associating yourself with. Otherwise, I would recommend to Lewis to bring in qualifying, just turn the volume down a little bit, drive more exit focused, clean, straight traction, exits and progressive initial braking and that sort of thing. But that wasn't the style that would have worked in 2007 when he first entered the sport. Yeah, the cars were dancing and it suited Lewis fantastically because he likes to have the car on the edge, on a knife edge, on the limit. It makes him feel alive and, brings out the best in him. So, but then that's not, you've got to be a chameleon. You've got to camouflage and change all times. So see what you're feeling, see what you want, compare to your friends, try different cars, try oversteer, try understeer, use the delta, and go in the direction that gives you the lap time. Just chase that. It was a tough question. So if you have a follow-up question, again, leave it in the comments for me. But I guess the next part you're asking is about how do you take the next step to actual racing? Again, what you're going to find on a different track, on a different car, on a different day, even sim to real life, is going to be completely different. And that's why one of my philosophies and principles is not do this and you'll succeed. It's like being able to problem solve is the best thing. It's like that saying, if you had one wish, what would it be? Well, to have a million wishes, because then you've got more choice, right? If you had one skill, what would it be? The ability to learn anything, because then you can learn everything from piano to guitar to French to racing to tennis to painting to artistry to whatever. So the ability to problem solve, understand the fundamentals, understand the principles, and go in the direction of lap time is all you really need. That should be your style. So I hope that makes sense. I can't give you any more color, unfortunately. Like, what would my driving style be? I think, like, I've gotten to know myself better over the years. I think I don't trail brake very deep into the corner. I like to release the brakes earlier than other people and go in with steering and throttle thereafter. So a lot of people I race with, they carry the brake into the corner completely, whereas my trailing comes off and then it gets to a point where I just drop it. Like in the last 15% or so, I just come out of the brakes. But I've got my brake mapping set up to be able to do that. So if you looked at the telemetry and didn't know my mapping, you're going to be confused again. Same as we look at Leclerc's telemetry, we don't know his throttle mapping. It might do nothing in the first 10% and then the throttle comes in thereafter. The mapping works hand in hand with the pedals. So yeah, I hope that helps you. Again, let me know if you have a follow-up question. And sorry, I couldn't be of more help. I thought I was hoping I could answer that question better, but that's the best I can give you. Sorry. All right, the next one, Humphrey Tavir 1338. Can you explain what a driver means by balance of the car? They are talking about the tires, suspension, brakes, etc. Balance is equality, equilibrium, but between what? Between speed and controllability, or more maybe. Okay, so that's an easy one. Thanks. Thank you for that. It's going to give me a break in this video because I think the questions so far have been testing me. Okay, so balance, front to rear balance. It's the understeer, oversteer balance. When you turn the car into a corner, what happens? Does the back step out first or does the front slide and you get understeer? A well-balanced car just means they're going to slide in harmony, and I don't like saying that because you don't want to slide the car, but that's what the physics of what's happening. Car's going to slide in harmony front to rear and it's perfectly balanced. So it's the understeer, oversteer balance. If I can go a next step and give you a more profound answer, what is this balance in the high speed? What is this balance in the low speed? What's the aero balance therefore in the high speed? What's the mechanical balance in the low speed? That's pretty much it. So when they say the car is very balanced, it just means there's no oversteer or no understeer or very minimal and it's manageable and so on. So that's what you're looking for at all times. You want the car to be balanced and then you want to have good straight line speed. And then, yeah, thereafter you just want more and more grip. Next question, MStar011. You mentioned Lewis's driving style is not great for these generation of cars. But what's confusing me is his race pace isn't affected. Compared to Russell, Lewis seems to be able to beat him for pace. What's he doing in races better than his teammates? Good question. I understand where you're coming from and I understand why it doesn't stack. Like, how can Lewis be so bad, quote unquote, in qualifying, but then so great in the race on the exact same car and it's the same Lewis Hamilton? Well, here's the thing. We change our styles for qualifying and for the race. For qualifying, you're under pressure. Like, you need to perform. You're pushing the limits of the car. Lewis, in my opinion, overdrives in these set of regs, at least in most cases last year in 2024. So like you turn up the volume a lot on your own driving technique. You brake later, you brake harder, you turn in harder, you get on the throttle earlier, you get on more aggressively, you downshift more aggressively. The Lewis that qualifies is not the Lewis that races. And what I'm trying to say is Lewis's inputs in qualifying are not the inputs when the helmet goes on in its race. When he knows it's full tank of fuel and harder tires and he's following in dirty air, he's very different things happen. He's a lot more subtle, a lot more progressive, and crucially, I think this is the biggest one, the use of the tight line. He asks less of the car in a race, which it's not capable of. So when I mean not capable, the heavy car and the hard tires, and he knows the car's not capable, and the aero wash and looking after the tires and all of that. The tight line is like ticks all of those boxes, allows you to maintain good lap times and not have tire wear. But in qualifying, that has to go out the window because you're looking to carry more speed into the corner. You're looking to maximize the downforce. Aero wash is not a thing. Hard tires are not a thing. Tire life is not a thing. The car's nice and light. So he's looking to raise and ask for more. And that's a different style. In one of my programs, there's a style how to drive on the limit because it's very different to how to drive a race. Inputs are totally different, like I said. So that's probably your disconnect, is you think that every driver is doing the same technique in qualifying in the race. Not really. In the quali, the car's a lot more capable. The inputs and the volume's got to be turned up a lot more. So that's where I think the late hard braking doesn't serve him that well. But in the race, I don't think he's doing that. I think he's braking earlier. He's braking more progressively. He's doing the tight line. He's managing his traction. The car's not stepping out. Like, things are a lot better. So then he's competitive. So that's why I think. Again, let me know if you agree or disagree, if it helped. Give me some feedback in the comments. Okay, another one on driving style. Nicholas Micheletti, 9080. Hi, what do you think of Alex Albon and his driving style? I see him as a superb driver in change of direction and high-speed corners. So this is great because I like what you're doing here, is like trying to characterize a driver and having a look at the high speed or having a look at a certain set of corners and seeing what they do well. And therefore, you're beginning to understand how to problem solve, which is great. So you see him as a superb driver in change of direction, high speed, of which there's not that many, by the way. If you're talking about S's, there's only 3, Austin, Silverstone, and Suzuka. Other high-speed changes of direction, you know, I'd have to think. I'm sure there are more, but I guess Austin has a couple more. But anyway, I just thought I'd call that out because there's not too many that come to mind. High-speed change of direction. 11 and 12 in Melbourne. It's now 9 and 10. So if that's what you mean, then we're on the same page. So he's so fast in tracks like Silverstone and Suzuka. Bang. Okay, there you go. So you're talking about S's, I guess. And I guess Austin as well. He was able to beat Charles in those tracks when they were teammates in GP3. Leclerc said that Alex is the fastest driver he's ever faced before in F1. Thanks, I'm a big fan of your work. Thanks, Nicholas. Okay, so what do I make of Alex Albon's driving style? I'm going to be honest with you, I haven't looked at it through the microscope and fine-tooth combed it. I think it's like with Alex and with most of them these days in Formula One, it's not the driving style that's going to let you down. Like Lando lost 2024 championship, not from driving style. It was from the start. It was from the mentality. It was on the mindset side. It was on the racecraft side, on the attack and defense side. It was on the safety car side. It was on the yellow flag side. It was on the team side, on the strategy side. Like none of this has to do with Lando's driving style. And the reason I say that is because one memory of Alex Albon comes to mind in Austria when he was on a fresher set of tyres in the Red Bull and had a chance to win that race. I don't remember the year, I'm sorry. And he started to attack around the outside, down into the downhill braking. I think it's turn 4. And it didn't work out. And that's when I thought to myself, oh, Alex doesn't have it because he had an opportunity to win that race and deliver the 25 points and he didn't. So I guess what I'm highlighting to is the lap time is one piece, the conversion is another piece, technical and tactical. So my viewpoint of Alex is more on the tactical side. I think there's more work to be done over there. And like I said, I'm not sure, honestly. Like, I have to be honest and say I haven't looked. I don't know all of the drivers on the grid, their driving styles in exceptional detail, other than what I've covered with Hamilton, Verstappen. We've looked at Leclerc a little bit, but I haven't, like, I don't go too far down, honestly. So I'm not sure, but I like your way of thinking. If you see him as a good driver in the high-speed change of direction, assuming S's, as you say, Silverstone and Suzuka, okay, great. Jump onto the telemetry, try to work out why that might be. I guess you're an Alex Albon fan and you rate him. Again, I can't comment. I'm not sure. Let's see how Carlos goes this year against him. I feel like Carlos will get the upper hand comfortably. Again, my rating of Alex is not 10 out of 10. I feel like he's still got a bit to do. But yeah, that's just like, it literally is just my opinion. Like, he could come out and do a better job against Carlos. I'm not sure. I don't have an opinion on the style. I have an opinion on the tactical side. I think Alex, when he had chances, he didn't convert them. So similar to Lando in that sense. Is he mega quick? I don't think either. I'm not sure. I haven't really seen it. When he was next to Max, he struggled massively. So yeah, again, if you had a follow-up question or you want me to go in a little bit deeper, write me a comment on this video and I'll be happy to continue the conversation there. Okay, the next one from Mr. Alex. Yes, I have a damn question. When you do those telemetry overlaps of drivers, which we just did before, do they have weight transfer telemetry? I've seen it on the TV graphics, so there must be that info somewhere. Can you do a comparison on how different drivers roll the weight over? Mr. Alex, that's a good question. That would be cool to see. I don't have it on me. We don't get that telemetry, the weight transfer, but it would be good, wouldn't it? It would show you when you brake how much weight is going to the front. And that gives you an indication of, you know, how deep you're pushing the brakes, how fast, how hard, how late. Same as the steering and so on. Like classic friction circle stuff. So no, sorry, we don't have that. Yeah, and I can imagine how insightful that would be for you as well. Okay, the next question comes from Kashish Gupta 5005. How much of a role does increasing downforce play in a driver's ability? We've seen young drivers doing well in karting in F4 and struggling in F3, F2, which has increased downforce. Is there something wrong with their technique? Yes. In this case, yes, absolutely. I like your problem solving and the way you frame this question as well. With downforce and without downforce. And say without, F4 is not much downforce. And karting is a totally different beast. So let's just quickly put karting off the table because I don't think that's relevant at all. Sorry. And this is with talking from experience here. Karts and cars are very different in probably two areas. The differential on a car is not present on a go-kart. So that's not how they corner. So the diff is one part and the jacking in a go-kart is the other. That is how they corner. They lift up the inside rear wheel, pivot on three wheels and then corner. So that's one big piece. And then the downforce is, as you mentioned, is the other big piece. So the diff and rotation and downforce is the other one. So karting, I think we can put off the table. The lines I take in the sim don't work in karts. They're too wide. They're too sweeping. So yes, I agree with you. I've seen drivers, amazing drivers in karts, struggle as soon as they get into cars. And I've seen people that are not great in karts go amazingly well in open formula cars. Yes, because the downforce and the differential, don't forget that because that's the means of cornering. You corner with the diff and the downforce. It's not just one or the other. So yeah, is there something wrong in their technique? Yeah. So look, the biggest thing is that downforce increases with the square of speed, I believe. So that's what you want to leverage as an open formula driver. People always say to me, what's the biggest tool that a driver can leverage to go faster? Racing line is one and downforce is the other. Downforce is your friend. Downforce is a tool that you can use. Like when you're driving, there are times when you have downforce and there are other times when you don't have downforce. So you got to be able to speak both languages. You got to be able to drive with downforce and drive without downforce. When I say with and without, it's as it relates to speed. Going through the S's, like Nicholas's previous question, is when downforce is active. in the Silverstone S's, in the Suzuka S's, Austin S's. But like at the back of these tracks, like Silverstone, Brooklands and Luffield and all that, and Austin, all those tight, small, decreasing radius corners at the back, downforce is not active. You need to be able to drive in a completely different way. So yes, the distinction you've drawn is true, and it has to do with the inputs when downforce is active and not active. How does that look? Just quickly, when downforce is active, the car's a lot more capable. You can turn the volume up. Inputs can be a lot stronger. Car's a lot more reactive and dynamic. You can ask more questions of the car and get better answers. When downforce is not active, the car's pretty clumsy. Doesn't want to turn, doesn't want to brake, doesn't want to accelerate out of the corner either. So that's when massaging and gentle approaches work. Gentle throttle introduction, short shifting, plug shifting, brake balance backwards, and more engine braking, turning more progressively, all these things. So yes, they're very different styles, and that would be the reason why they would be struggling or performing better in one or the other. Cool, there you go. So that was the last question. So thank you for all your questions. Again, I hope my answers helped you. If you had any follow-up questions, leave them in the comment section for me below. I will answer them. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.